Now, many of you know that I'm a minister. I gave my life to the Lord back in 1976, and I went off to college right outside of Chicago and went to Bible college there, and pastored in Virginia and pastored in Athens. And the time I spent as repo man, I was out of the Lord's will and away from the Lord, and He took me to the woodshed, and that's another story. The reason I say that is to tell you this. Look, I call this one, this is chapter 4, and it's called Bluffing. Now, some people may say, well, that's lying. Well, that's lying is such a harsh word. I want to call it bluffing. And a lot of times you can bluff your way out of a problem when you're repoing in any situation, but follow along with me if you will. Since the average debtor usually doesn't know the law concerning or covering repossessions, many times we could bluff our way through most objections they might have about us taking a vehicle. I have always been pretty good at bluffing to get myself out of a bind. I learned a long time ago that if you just walk around acting like you're supposed to be there or act like you own the place, for the most part, people are not going to ask you why you're there. Even if you were somewhere you're not supposed to be, if you act like you are supposed to be there, you may well get away with it. I started preaching at Cook County Jail in Chicago in the late 70s. I was in the jail ministry of our college, and we would drive to Cook County Jail early on Sunday mornings with day-old donuts from Winchell's Donut House. The guards would let us into the dorms and these huge cells with 100 or more sleeping in cots, and we'd walk down the aisles between the row of cots, gently slapping the men on the head or on the feet, and tell them that Protestant services were downstairs in 15 minutes. We used the donuts as an incentive to get them to come down, so they had to sit through the service in the dining hall to get the donuts after the preaching. We wrote down the names and addresses of the men who made decisions for Christ in the service, and the next Saturday morning, we would take that information and we'd go visit families in Chicago. Now, these guys were criminals. They were not from the best parts of town. In fact, most of them were from really bad parts of town. The south side of Chicago, in the baddest part of town. You know what I'm talking about. These guys didn't have the funds, family, or friends to bail them out and bond out, so they're still in jail. So it was these rough neighborhoods that we went to every Saturday. One Saturday morning, I was visiting families with another preacher from the jail ministry, and we were walking down a neighborhood street in South Chicago when a police car pulled up. There were two uniformed officers in the car, and they were wondering what these two white guys were doing wandering around in a predominantly black neighborhood. The driver rolled his window down and said, "What are you guys doing in this neighborhood?" We said, "Well, we're just visiting families of inmates from Cook County Jail." He started shaking his head and said, no, you guys don't need to be in this neighborhood. It isn't safe for you to be here. You need to leave. Well, we told him we appreciated his concern and advice, but we'd be fine. The Lord will take care of us. And he sat there a minute, no doubt pondering the stupidity of these two stupid kids. And then he just smiled and shook his head and drove off. We never really had any problems. The families appreciated our concern for them and their loved ones. One family was so happy to see us and to hear from their son, they bought a suit at Amvet's and gave it to me the next Saturday when I came by. I wore that suit for years. One cold, icy Saturday morning, another preacher and I were visiting addresses on the south side of Chicago. I forget who it was that was with me, but it was a cold morning. We were both wearing long trench coats. I had a long coat, quilted coat, and kept me nice and warm. I also wore a fedora hat, and I drove a 1978 Ford LTD2. It looked like a police car. Between the coat and the hat and the LTD2, we looked official, almost like policemen. We found a spot and parallel parked on a side street just around the corner from the 3-floor flat where we were going to visit a family. We got out of the car and walked around the corner, and when we walked around the corner, we walked right into a crowd of big black guys. Now, these were 4 or 5 of some of the toughest looking hombres that I'd seen outside of jail. They were big fellas, and the more I looked at them, the bigger they got. I mean, you can't forgive me, but it was the south side of Chicago. Thinking quickly, I said, "Hello, gentlemen. I'm from the Cook County Coroner's Office, and we're here to investigate the circumstances surrounding a death on the 3rd floor of this apartment building. The body is still up in the apartment, and we're going to go up and secure the scene, and I need for you men to stay here and help me bring that body down when we get back." And they just kind of, okay, They sort of nodded and mumbled, and we turned and went up to the 3rd floor. My buddy asked me on the way up, he said, "What were your plans when we come back down?" I said, "I have no idea. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but I'm hoping that what I ask them will do what I hope it'll do. Hopefully it won't be an issue." We knocked on the door of the inmate's family's apartment, but no one was home. And when we came back downstairs, the men were gone. They wanted nothing to do with moving a body, which is what I was hoping. So bluffing can be a good thing. I bluffed a lot in repoing. Like I said, some may call it lying, but lying is such a harsh word. I considered it looking at the truth from another angle. There's a biblical principle that I often use in repo, and I don't quote it, but I kept it in mind. Proverbs chapter 15, verse number 1. "A soft answer turneth away wrath." Being an arrogant jerk is not going to get you too far in the asset recovery industry. You got to be tough. You got to be firm. You've got to have the courage to do things that could get you hurt or worse. But in dealing with debtors, it's always best to be polite. You ought to at least start off that way. I'll tell you, if I ever got caught hooking up a vehicle and it's still on private property, it didn't matter what time, day or night, I would always start off by apologizing. And I'm going to tell you, I've left the book here for a second, but I'm going to tell you, this worked every time I did it. If I ever got caught, this will disarm the person. They may be angry, they may be confused, they may be furious. This works every time and turns them into a nice person, or at least a neutral person where they're not angry anymore. Every time I got caught, it didn't matter what the debtor said, it never failed. They might be angry, surprised, confused, it didn't matter. I always apologized first. And I said, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing taking my car? I'm sorry, man. Hey, look, I'm sorry. I know I was supposed to be here yesterday, but I got tied up and I didn't make it. I'll get this out of here as quick as I can." Now, what I've done is I've made it look like that I think he knows that I'm supposed to come get this, and I'm kind of putting the ball in his court. I always apologize first, and it always had a very disarming effect on them. I'm humbling myself, and I'm saying, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I know I was supposed to get here yesterday, but I got tied up." He's going, "What are you talking about?" Then I go, "Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't know? I was supposed to pick this up. The finance company sent me to pick this up. If you'd like to get your stuff out, get your stuff out of here, go ahead and get your stuff out, but I got to take it." Now, it wasn't true that I had to take it because, again, I'm counting on them not knowing the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. I was bluffing again. I didn't have to take the vehicle, but I wanted to, and if they didn't know the law, I could usually bluff my way through it. Man, I'm sorry. Man, I'm sorry. I got to take it. I am sorry. If you stay humble and you stay calm and man, I am so sorry, but I've got to take it. You can always be mean later on. You can always be firm later on. You can always come back, you know, whatever you have to do. I could always back off if I felt like something would go wrong. You know, like I said, well, I got to take it. You know, man, I'm sorry, I got to take it. I got to take it. Well, I'm sorry, well, I'll tell you what, you can always back off. But, you know, it only works if the debtor doesn't know their rights and authority under the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. I counted on debtors not knowing the law, especially when I repoed in Birmingham. Birmingham's the only city where I kept my pistol out. I kept it out next to me in the truck. Having a pistol on your person is a definite violation of the FDCPA, and I'm not real sure that you could keep one in the vehicle either, in the truck. I never had to use it. I never even got it out, but I had it close by just in case. If nothing else, it made me feel better. Another thing I usually only did in Birmingham or in really bad areas was I would wear a private investigator's badge on my belt. I think I've got it in this drawer back here. I spent a little time as a private investigator before I started doing repos, so I had the badge, but I would hang it on my belt if I felt like for some reason that you know it might be a dangerous neighborhood or a dangerous part of town. If that badge could give you a slight edge, the slight edge you need to stay safe, then hey, more power to you. Even though it said private investigator, it was still a badge. I didn't wear it to intimidate the debtor. I wore it in a bad neighborhood as a safeguard against getting robbed or worse. The motive didn't matter to the law, though. Wearing any kind of badge was a big no-no as well. According to the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act, it could be considered the color of law or false and misleading representation, and you can't give the impression, follow me now, you cannot give the impression that law enforcement is helping in the recovery of the vehicle. I never claimed to be a policeman. I never pretended to be law enforcement, but if me wearing a badge put a hint of doubt in somebody's mind, I was okay with that. It plainly said private investigator on it, but no one ever got close enough to read it, and I sure wasn't going to stand still and point it out, waiting for them to catch on. I had one guy ask me about it once. He said, "What's with the badge?" And I told him, you know, it just kind of helped me keep me from getting in trouble. He just laughed, and I took his vehicle. So, you know, bluffing, you can get away with it, and yeah. But again, it don't hurt to be nice. Be nice. You know, oh man, I'm sorry, man. If you come across as you big jerk, I'm gonna take this vehicle with you like a knife. You're just asking for trouble. I mean, you can always be nice. And you can back off and let it be so nice, you know, that when, if you have to back off, they're not really worried that you're going to come back and get it. And then you can sneak back and get it, which is whole nother story. All right, well, have a good day, and I will be with you here shortly for Chapter 5.